So if you were to lock a raw food vegan and a hardcore carnivore in a room together, you would generally expect a fight to break out. I mean, it's just, they're completely opposed.
Yeah, pretty much a guaranteed argument.
Right. Because one firmly believes that, animal protein is toxic and causes chronic disease. And the other is entirely convinced that plant fiber is this, like, physical hazard and that broccoli is basically poison.
Exactly, yeah. You really couldn't find two biological frameworks that are more violently opposed.
But we actually found a document where these two extremes agree, like exactly agree on 10 rules for human health.
It's fascinating.
It is. So today we're doing a deep dive into this bizarre 10-point biological treaty between two leading figures in nutrition. We've got Gary Null, a PhD who advocates for a raw plant-based detoxification model.
Right.
And on the other side, Joachim Barkal, who is a strength coach, championing this evolutionary carnivore ketogenic diet.
Yeah, and the source text we're looking at is titled 10 Key Points of Dietary Consensus for Optimum Health, a comparative analysis of Gary Null and Joachim Bartol.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Huh. Well, what's so compelling about it is that it just bypasses that endless, exhausting debate about, whether humans should eat plants or meat.
Which is everywhere online.
Right, it's everywhere. But this document looks at the modern industrial food system and basically asks, regardless of your chosen fuel source, what are the universal biological deal breakers?
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore those exact deal breakers point by point. We are looking at a shared blueprint for survival in a highly processed world.
Absolutely.
But real quick, before we jump into the first point, we need to set some ground rules.
Yeah.
You're not here to take a side on the vegan versus carnivore debate.
No, definitely not.
And the source material also dives pretty heavily into some politically charged environmental claims. Things concerning municipal water supplies, agricultural chemicals, industrial farming practices.
Which can be a bit of a minefield.
Totally. So we are not endorsing or validating the politics of those claims, whether left-wing or right-wing. We are strictly unpacking the biological arguments presented in this comparative analysis so you can evaluate them for yourself.
I think that's the best way to approach this, really, because the arguments are incredibly intense. I mean, both Null and Bartol start from the exact same premise.
Which is what?
That the foundation of the modern Western diet must be entirely dismantled before any real healing can begin, like torn down completely.
Wow, okay. And that teardown starts with point one, which is the total rejection of refined sugars.
Right.
Which, on the surface sounds obvious. Everyone knows eating spoonfuls of white sugar is a bad idea.
Sure.
But when you actually look at their differing metabolic models, it's actually quite strange that they agree so fiercely here. I mean, Null wants your body running primarily on plant-derived carbohydrates and glucose.
Yes.
And Bartol wants your body running on animal-derived ketones with zero carbohydrates. So how is refined sugar the mutual enemy of two completely different metabolic engines?
Well, the answer really comes down to cellular disruption. It's not just about empty calories. Refined sugar acts as this active chemical wrecking ball.
Okay, break that down for me.
So in Null's model, the whole goal is to alkalize the body. He wants to saturate it with plant-based antioxidants to repair tissue.
Right.
But refined sucrose and high fructose corn syrup do the exact opposite. They are massive oxidative stressors.
Okay, stop right there. Explain oxidative stress for us, because that term gets thrown around on literally every health blog. But what is actually happening on a cellular level?
Fair question. So think of a healthy molecule in your body as a perfectly balanced magnet.
Okay.
It has a matched set of electrons. But when you consume massive amounts of refined sugar, the metabolic processing of that sugar generates free radicals.
And those are the bad guys.
Right. They're unstable molecules that are missing an electron. And because they're unstable, they frantically, violently rip electrons away from your healthy cells. Yeah, they steal from your DNA, your proteins, your cell membranes, just to stabilize themselves. And that process of stealing electrons, that is oxidation.
So if you picture a piece of iron rusting when it's left out in the rain, you're picturing oxidation.
Yes, exactly. Null believes refined sugar essentially rusts your internal physiology. It creates this systemic inflammation that he's trying to cure.
So for the raw vegan, sugar is basically the match that starts the inflammatory fire.
Perfectly said.
But Bartol isn't eating antioxidants to put out fires, right? He's trying to keep his body running on animal fat. So how does sugar sabotage the carnivore?
Through the hormone insulin. See, Bartol's evolutionary carnivore model relies on keeping insulin levels practically flat.
Because insulin stops fat burning.
Exactly. When insulin is low, your liver can continuously convert fatty acids into beta-hydroxybutyrate, which are ketone bodies.
And your brain and muscles use those ketones for energy.
Right. But the moment you consume refined sugar, your blood glucose spikes. The pancreas panics and just floods the bloodstream with insulin to shove that toxic excess sugar into your cells.
And that insulin spike flips a biological switch.
Yes, it immediately shuts down ketogenesis. The body is forced out of fat-burning mode. The liver stops making ketones.
So you just crash.
You get wild glycemic swings, massive energy spikes followed by crushing crashes, and you end up feeding pathogenic bacteria in the gut. So for Bartol, sugar is this chemical override that just turns off the evolutionary engine.
Okay, so refined sugar is universally recognized as metabolic poison. It either rusts your cells or it breaks your fat-burning engine.
Basically.
But if sugar is the spark that damages the cell, the body has to repair that damage. And cells are built out of fats, which takes us directly into point 2.
A complete elimination of seed oils.
Right. Both platforms strongly reject refined industrial seed oils.
Canola, soybean, corn, cottonseed, safflower oil. They insist you have to completely avoid these and get your dietary fats exclusively from clean, unrefined whole food sources.
And I struggle with this one because you walk into literally any grocery store and seed oils are in everything.
Everything.
They're in the salad dressing, the crackers, the oat milk, the bread. If they are so fundamentally dangerous to human biology, how did they become the default fat of the entire global food supply?
Well, the shift to seed oils was driven by industrial economics and shelf stability. It was entirely divorced from human biology.
Like it wasn't a health choice at all.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
In the mid-20th century, the food industry needed cheap liquid fats that wouldn't go rancid on a supermarket shelf for months at a time.
Right.
Traditional fats like butter, tallow, cold-pressed olive oil, they're relatively expensive to produce, and they have shorter shelf lives. So the industry turned to seeds. The problem is, you can't just squeeze a soybean or a rapeseed and get a puddle of oil like you can with an olive.
Right, you can literally crush an olive with a rock and get oil.
Yeah.
How do you get oil out of a tiny hard seed?
Through intense industrial processing. The seeds are heated to incredibly high temperatures. Then they're treated with petroleum-based chemical solvents.
Solvents like what?
Usually hexane, to extract the absolute maximum amount of oil. And then, because the resulting liquid smells and tastes absolutely foul, it has to be bleached and chemically deodorized.
I mean, you're describing a manufacturing process that sounds closer to making motor oil than food.
It's very similar, honestly.
But beyond the gross factor, what is the actual biological danger of eating a fat extracted this way?
It comes down to molecular stability. Seed oils are highly concentrated in polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs.
Okay, PUFA.
And the chemical structure of a polyunsaturated fat includes multiple double bonds. Those double bonds are very fragile.
So they break easily.
Exactly. When they're exposed to high heat, chemical solvents, or even just light during the extraction process, those bonds break and they react with oxygen. They oxidize, they create lipid peroxides.
Meaning the fat is essentially rancid and damaged before it even goes into the plastic bottle on the grocery store shelf.
Precisely. And here's the truly terrifying part. Your body uses the fats you eat to construct the lipid bilayer of your cell membranes.
Okay, so you are what you eat, literally.
Literally. If you consume oxidized, unstable seed oils, your body incorporates those damaged molecules directly into your cellular walls.
So it's like trying to build a brick house, but instead of using solid fired bricks, you're using crumbling, waterlogged mud. The house might stand up for a little while, but the structural integrity is compromised from day one.
That is an excellent way to visualize it. Your cells become rigid and highly prone to inflammation.
And how do our two experts solve this?
Well, Null addresses this structural problem by demanding cold-pressed, unrefined plant oils: olive, coconut, macadamia, flaxseed.
So he wants the fats intact, raw, and protected from heat.
Right. And Bartol achieves the same structural integrity through animal sourcing. He demands pasture-raised animal fats: tallow, suet, raw butter.
Which are saturated fats.
Mostly saturated and monounsaturated, they lack those fragile double bonds, meaning they are highly stable and naturally resistant to oxidation.
So again, diametrically opposed diets. One is drinking cold-pressed flax oil, the other is eating raw beef suet. But they both agree that factory-made seed oils are structurally destroying our cellular membranes.
100%.
Which brings us to point 3. The avoidance of refined carbohydrates. And this is where I actually have to challenge the premise of this entire consensus document.
Oh, how so?
Because their views on carbohydrates seem totally irreconcilable. I mean, Knoll's protocol recommends a massive fiber intake, like 35 to 50 grams a day.
Right.
He relies heavily on ancient carbohydrates like quinoa, amaranth, millet, buckwheat. Meanwhile, Bartol literally wrote a book called Beyond the Fiber Lie.
He did.
He argues that plant fiber physically scrapes and damages the gastrointestinal tract, causing microtears and low-grade inflammation. His protocol demands 0 to 10% carbohydrates, total elimination of all grains. So how can they both be right about optimum health if they fundamentally disagree on how the human gut even works? Aren't we just cherry-picking a consensus here?
It looks like a glaring contradiction, I agree. But the consensus they reach isn't about carbohydrates as a broad category.
Oh, okay.
It's strictly focused on the refining of modern wheat and gluten. They both look at the processed grain carbohydrates that make up the bulk of the modern diet. White bread, pasta, pastries, commercial flour.
The stuff everyone eats?
Exactly. And they identify them as severe metabolic hazards, just for different reasons.
Okay, so explain the difference. Why does Knoll champion a bowl of quinoa but condemn a slice of white bread? They're both plants.
For Knoll, the issue is what industrial farming and milling have done to the plant. A natural grain of wheat has 3 parts. There's the fibrous bran on the outside, the nutrient-rich germ inside, and the starchy endosperm.
So it's a whole package.
Right. But modern industrial milling completely strips away the bran and the germ to create white flour. It removes all the vitamins, the natural enzymatic cofactors, and most importantly, the fiber that actually slows down digestion.
Wow.
So what you're left with is just pure pulverized starch. And in the human digestive tract, that highly processed starch acts exactly like refined sugar.
So it spikes blood glucose.
It initiates systemic inflammation, and it feeds pathogenic yeast in the gut.
It's essentially pre-digested sugar.
Exactly. And for Bartol, the issue is even more fundamental. He views modern wheat and processed gluten as an evolutionary mismatch.
What does that mean exactly?
Gluten is a complex protein that many human digestive tracts struggle to fully break down.
Okay.
When partially digested gluten peptides cross the gut lining, they can trigger a systemic immune response. Bartol argues this is the root of many modern autoimmune conditions.
So whether you view it as a stripped-down starch causing sugar spikes like Knoll, or an evolutionary mismatched protein triggering autoimmunity like Bartol, the processed wheat has to go.
Exactly. The end result is the same.
Well, the takeaway here completely dismantles the standard Western way of eating. Because if you take away the refined sugar, the seed oils, and the processed wheat, you have essentially emptied 90% of the average grocery store.
Yeah, you really have, which forces a radical shift in how you acquire calories.
And once you've stripped the diet of those highly processed macronutrients, the consensus moves into a new phase. It's no longer just about the macro components of the food. It shifts to the microscopic, invisible chemicals layered onto our food and water supply.
Right, the hidden stuff.
Exactly. Section 2, the chemical cleanse.
Mm-hmm.
Point 4 is the mandate for 0 artificial additives. Both protocols dictate that dietary intake must be restricted to pure, natural ingredients.
Synthetic preservatives, artificial sweeteners, food dyes, and chemical binders are rejected outright as severe chemical hazards.
And this is incredibly relevant today because you see products constantly marketed as health foods or labeled vegan or keto-friendly that are absolutely packed with artificial sweeteners.
Oh, sucralose, aspartame, just so they taste good without sugar.
But neither Knoll nor Bartol would ever touch them.
Never.
Because 0 calories doesn't mean 0 biological impact, right?
Yeah.
But what is the actual mechanism of harm here? If an artificial sweetener just passes through the body without being digested for energy, why is it dangerous?
Because human physiology lacks the evolutionary software to process these novel lab-created molecules.
Okay.
Your liver doesn't recognize them as food, it recognizes them as toxins. In Knoll's framework, artificial additives severely burden the liver's detoxification pathways.
How does that work?
So the liver processes toxins in 2 main phases. Phase I involves enzymes altering the toxic chemical to make it water-soluble.
Right.
And then phase 2 involves attaching another molecule to it so it can be safely excreted through bile or urine.
Okay, let's break that down with an analogy. Think of phase I as bagging up the toxic trash in your house, and phase 2 as actually carrying that trash bag out to the curb for the garbage truck.
That is a perfect analogy. Artificial additives, synthetic dyes, chemical preservatives, they overwhelm the system. They interrupt the garbage truck.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the liver enzymes get bottlenecked trying to process these alien molecules. So you end up with right, because it was a synthetic zero-calorie sweetener that creates deep metabolic confusion. And emulsifiers, which are used to bind fats and water together in processed foods, have been shown to strip away the protective mucosal lining of the gut.
Causing leaky gut.
Yes, causing the very intestinal permeability Bartol is so desperate to avoid.
Basically, if a chemical was engineered in a lab rather than grown in the dirt or born in a field, your body doesn't possess the instruction manual to handle it safely.
That's the bottom line.
Which brings us to point 5. We've established that the liver is constantly trying to flush out these toxins, and arguably, the most universal tool we have for flushing the body is water.
Yes, water.
Both protocols prioritize clean water, demanding sources completely free of fluoride, chlorine, and heavy pipe leach toxins that you commonly find in municipal tap water.
And this point highlights a profound paradox in modern health advice. You're constantly told to drink 8 glasses of water a day to hydrate your cells and flush your system. Water is supposed to be the ultimate detoxifier.
But what happens when the water itself is the toxic delivery system?
It's a deeply unsettling thought.
You turn on the kitchen sink thinking you're making a healthy choice, but the raw vegan and the carnivore are looking at your glass of tap water in sheer horror.
Yeah, they really are.
Break down the actual chemistry of why tap water is a problem for them. Let's start with chlorine.
Sure, municipal water treatment facilities add chlorine and chloramine to the water supply for a very specific reason: to kill pathogenic bacteria and prevent waterborne diseases like cholera.
Which, to be fair, is a good thing.
It's a highly effective antimicrobial agent. It saves lives.
But the human digestive tract is essentially a giant ecosystem of bacteria.
Exactly. The human microbiome is comprised of trillions of beneficial bacteria that regulate everything from digestion to immune function to neurotransmitter production. When you drink heavily chlorinated tap water day after day, you are essentially swallowing a tiny swimming pool. Both experts argue that you're ingesting a potent, broad-spectrum antimicrobial that continually suppresses and damages your beneficial gut flora.
That makes perfect sense. What about the other additions? Like fluoride is added for dental health. Why do Null and Bartol reject it?
Because fluoride is a biologically active halogen, it competes with iodine for uptake in the thyroid gland.
Oh, so it messes with your thyroid.
Yes, both protocols view municipal fluoridation as unnecessary systemic medicating that can suppress metabolic function and thyroid health.
And then there's the pipes themselves.
Right. Aging municipal infrastructure means heavy metals like lead and copper constantly leach from old pipes into the water supply.
And Null's entire protocol utilizes raw juices and clean water to pull heavy metals out of the tissues. So drinking the very metals he's trying to detoxify completely defeats the purpose.
Exactly. And Bartol similarly views tap water as this sort of environmental contamination that evolutionary biology simply isn't equipped to filter out at that scale.
So they both advocate for heavily filtered reverse osmosis water, or pure, unadulterated spring water. No compromises.
None at all.
Now, speaking of antimicrobials like chlorine, we move from the water we drink to the water we use to wash our food. Point 6, avoiding industrial sanitizers.
Right. Both investigators demand the avoidance of harsh chemicals like industrial bleach or chlorine in the sanitization of meat and vegetables. They advocate exclusively for natural acids like apple cider vinegar or lactic acid.
This is a highly specific yet incredibly telling point of agreement, because the reality of industrial food processing is that it operates at a massive, terrifying scale.
Very terrifying.
Whether a factory is packing a bag of pre-washed spinach or butchering thousands of cattle a day, the risk of bacterial contamination from E. coli or salmonella is astronomically high.
It's a huge problem for the industry.
And I think people have this pristine image in their heads. You buy a bag of pre-washed organic greens in a plastic clamshell, or you buy a perfectly red factory-farmed chicken breast, and you think, great, a factory washed it. It's safe.
Right. It says triple washed right on the bag.
But Null and Bartol are arguing that the wash itself is a severe health hazard. What exactly are these factories washing the food in?
Well, the standard industrial solution to the immense bacterial load of factory farming is to run the vegetables and the meat through diluted chlorine baths, Or they spray them with parasitic acid and bleach solutions.
They're bleaching the meat.
Yes, antimicrobial carcass washes are standard practice in conventional meat processing.
That is wild.
And the problem is that chemical residues remain on the food. For Null, eating a bleach-washed vegetable fundamentally undermines the entire philosophy of a healing, raw diet.
Because it's supposed to be natural.
A raw vegetable is supposed to be covered in beneficial soil-based microorganisms and delicate surface enzymes that actually aid in digestion. Dousing it in chlorine destroys that natural enzymatic profile and introduces a harsh, oxidizing toxin directly into the digestive tract.
And for Bartol.
For Bartol, chlorine washes on meat are just a chemical Band-Aid covering up the grotesque, unhygienic conditions of concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs.
Right, because if the animal was raised out in the sun on a clean, regenerative pasture and butchered in a small-scale facility, it wouldn't be covered in pathogenic fecal bacteria in the first place.
Precisely. The industrial sanitizer is proof of a broken agricultural system.
So both experts advocate bypassing the system entirely. They advise sourcing food from farmers or local producers who maintain natural hygiene and use safe sanitizers.
Like a simple lactic acid spray on meat, or washing vegetables in water with just a splash of apple cider vinegar.
It represents a total rejection of the industrial food safety model in favor of traditional organic hygiene.
Exactly.
And that transition takes us directly out of the processing plant and onto the farm itself for Section 3, environmental hazards and the packaging problem.
Getting to the root of the food.
Exactly. Point 7 is the mitigation of pesticide exposure. The consensus states that chemical sprays, specifically herbicides like glyphosate, represent critical biological hazards.
And the rule is uncompromising. 100% organic, non-GMO vegetables for Null, and livestock graze strictly on unsprayed, regenerative pasture soils for Bartol.
Glyphosate is the active ingredient in many commercial herbicides used globally on conventional crops. It's a widely documented systemic issue.
Yeah, it functions as both an antibiotic and a mineral chelator.
Meaning what?
Meaning it binds to vital minerals like magnesium and zinc in the soil, completely preventing the plants from absorbing them.
So the food is literally less nutritious.
Yes.
And for Null, the risk is incredibly direct. If you were juicing 10 pounds of conventional carrots and celery every day, and those plants were sprayed with glyphosate, you were directly drinking a concentrated glass of herbicide residue.
Which would cause massive oxidative stress, completely counteracting all the antioxidants in the juice.
But I have to ask about Bartol here. If he is telling his followers to completely avoid eating plants, why does he care if the corn or the soy fields are sprayed with pesticides? He's eating a steak.
That is the crucial question. And the answer comes down to a terrifying biological mechanism called bioaccumulation.
Bioaccumulation.
Right. Many environmental toxins, including glyphosate, heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants, they are highly lipophilic.
Break down lipophilic for us.
Lipo means fat, and philic means loving. These chemicals are fat-loving.
Okay.
They do not dissolve well in water, but they dissolve and store themselves very easily in fat tissue.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So when a conventional factory-farmed cow consumes thousands of pounds of genetically modified glyphosate-sprayed corn and soy over its lifetime, its liver cannot process all those toxins.
So where does it go?
To protect its vital organs, the animal's body sequesters those toxins into its adipose tissue, its fat.
Oh, wow. The fat acts as a biological sponge for the poison.
Yes. The fat literally absorbs and concentrates the environmental toxins. Now consider Bartol's dietary model.
The carnivore diet.
Right. The carnivore diet is not a high-protein diet, it is a high-fat diet. He recommends 70 to 80% of your daily calories come from animal fat to maintain ketosis.
Which means if you are following his diet, but you are buying cheap, conventionally raised, factory-farmed ground beef, you aren't just eating meat. You are consuming a highly concentrated dose of bioaccumulated industrial chemicals.
It is arguably more dangerous than eating the sprayed crops directly.
That's terrifying.
This is why Bartol insists that regenerative, chemical-free farming is an absolute non-negotiable requirement for the carnivore diet.
The livestock must graze on pristine, unsprayed soil. They must drink clean well water away from industrial runoff.
Right, and they can't be injected with vaccines containing heavy metal adjuvants like aluminum because all of it ends up in the fat.
It's fascinating. They both recognize that the modern environment is fundamentally toxic, but they have to build very different biological fortresses to protect themselves.
Exactly. Null protects his fortress by demanding 100% organic plants, so his delicate enzymes aren't destroyed.
And Bartol protects his fortress by demanding pristine animal husbandry, so his high-fat fuel source doesn't become a chemical weapon.
But it highlights a really sobering reality. We can sit here and debate the merits of plants versus meat all day long, but if the soil and the water used to grow, either of them are poisoned, both diets will ultimately fail.
That is a profound realization at the heart of this consensus, and it perfectly frames the next step in the supply chain. Because you can grow the most pristine organic kale or raise the healthiest grass-fed cow, but how does that food get from the farm to your kitchen?
Ah, the packaging.
That brings us to point 8, eliminating plastic packaging. To prevent hormonal endocrine disruption and microplastic contamination, both models mandate storing food in traditional butcher paper, glass, or stainless steel instead of soft plastics.
And this is a direct mechanical extension of the lipophilic problem we just discussed with pesticides.
Because of the chemicals in the plastic,
Right. The plastics used in food packaging, shrink wrap, produce bags, plastic Tupperware, they're manufactured using a host of chemical plasticizers.
like BPA.
Exactly. Bisphenol A and phthalates. These chemicals are well-documented endocrine disruptors. They mimic estrogen in the human body, binding to hormone receptors and just wreaking havoc on reproductive health, thyroid function, cellular metabolism.
I mean, most people know they shouldn't microwave plastic because the heat melts the chemicals into the food. But Null and Bartol are saying that just storing the food in plastic is a hazard. How does the chemical get from a cold piece of plastic wrap into the food?
Remember that fat acts as a solvent for lipophilic chemicals.
Okay.
When you take a highly fatty piece of food, a block of raw butter, a marbled ribeye steak, or even a jar of cold-pressed olive oil, and you wrap it in soft plastic, a chemical transfer occurs at the molecular level, even at room temperature or in the fridge.
No way.
Yes. The lipids in the food actively draw the endocrine-disrupting plasticizers out of the packaging and absorb them.
Wait, so wrapping a fatty piece of meat in cling wrap is fundamentally different than wrapping a dry head of lettuce. The fat is literally pulling the poison out of the plastic.
Yes. The fat accelerates the chemical leaching.
Wow.
This is why Bartol is so incredibly strict about avoiding plastic wrap for his meats. But Null is equally vigilant.
How so if he isn't eating fat?
Well, acidic foods like the raw citrus juices or tomato bases he advocates for, they also act as highly effective solvents that strip chemicals out of plastic containers.
Think about what this means for a trip to the grocery store for you as the consumer. You do all the research, you spend the extra money, you buy the expensive 100% organic produce, or you buy the expensive regeneratively raised grass-fed beef,
Right.
and then the supermarket wraps it tightly in cling film. Or you take it home and shove the leftovers into a plastic container. You're contaminating the pristine food at the very last mile.
Which is why the consensus demands a regression to older methods of food storage. Tupperware, shrink wrap, plastic baggies, they're out.
Grandma's heavy glass mason jars, stainless steel lunchboxes, and old-school butcher counters using waxed paper are back.
It really is a regression.
You realize that 21st century convenience is literally melting into our biology. So we have to go back to 19th century materials just to keep our hormones intact.
Both Null and Bartol are inherently reactionary. Their entire philosophies are a reaction against the industrialization of human sustenance. They fundamentally believe that modern convenience has cost us our vitality.
Which brings us to the final phase of this deep dive. We've sourced the cleanest, most unadulterated food and water possible. We've avoided the refined sugar, the damaged seed oils, the processed wheat, the bleach, the pesticides, and the plastic. We finally have clean fuel.
The hard part is done.
Right. But Section 4 is all about assimilation and action. Because how does your body actually absorb these pristine nutrients and maintain the physical machine? That is point 9, demanding high bioavailability.
The concept here is that nutrients are useless if your cells cannot absorb and utilize them.
Makes sense.
Both scholars flatly reject standard, over-the-counter synthetic supplements. Instead, they demand whole food delivery systems that provide natural cofactors for cellular repair.
Okay, I have to jump in because this is where their actual day-to-day methods diverge wildly, even though they're trying to solve the exact same biological problem. Null uses enzyme-rich raw juicing to flood the body with vitamins, right? Explain how juicing increases bioavailability.
So, Null argues that applying heat through cooking destroys vital plant enzymes and degrades water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C.
Oh,
But he also recognizes that human beings have a really hard time digesting massive amounts of raw plant fiber to extract the nutrients locked inside.
right. You can only choose so much kale.
Exactly. So, by juicing raw organic vegetables, he mechanically strips away the fibrous matrix. This makes the micronutrients immediately bioavailable to the bloodstream, requiring almost zero digestive effort, while preserving the delicate enzymes necessary for cellular detoxification.
And when he does use supplements.
When he does, he mandates highly bioavailable active forms, like methylated B12.
Explain methylated. Why does that matter?
Standard, cheap B12 supplements often use cyanocobalamin.
Cyano what?
Cyanocobalamin. It's a synthetic form attached to a cyanide molecule.
Wait, cyanide?
Yes. The liver actually has to expend energy to detach that cyanide molecule and convert the vitamin before the body can even use it.
That sounds incredibly counterproductive.
It is. Methylated B12 or methylcobalamin is the active form. It already has a methyl group attached, meaning it bypasses the liver's conversion process and is immediately ready for cellular use. Null demands that biological readiness.
But Bartol obviously isn't drinking a cold-pressed green juice to get his vitamins. How does a strict carnivore achieve high bioavailability without plants?
Bartol achieves it through the consumption of nutrient-dense, raw, or lightly cooked organ meats, specifically liver, heart, and kidney.
Okay, nature's multivitamin.
Exactly. His argument against plant-based nutrition is that plant vitamins are often in a precursor form that the human body struggles to convert efficiently.
Give me an example of a precursor.
Take vitamin A. Plants do not actually contain vitamin A. They contain beta-carotene, which is a precursor.
Oh, interesting.
The human body has to use enzymatic processes in the liver to convert beta-carotene into retinol, which is the usable form of vitamin A. Bartol points out that a significant portion of the population has genetic mutations that make this conversion highly inefficient.
So they eat the carrots, but don't actually get the vitamin A.
Exactly. Organ meats, however, provide preformed vitamin A, actual retinol, which the human body can absorb and utilize immediately with zero conversion required.
And he applies the same logic to other nutrients, too.
Right. Heme iron in meat versus non-heme iron in plants. Animal-based EPA and DHA versus plant-based ALA omega-3s.
It's the exact same biological logic applied to two entirely different kingdoms of food. They both agree that a cheap, synthetic multivitamin, bunch of isolated chemicals pressed into a hard, chalky pill in a factory, cannot replicate nature's nutrient delivery systems.
Because nature provides the vitamins packaged with the exact enzymes, fatty acids, and mineral cofactors required to absorb them.
Right.
You cannot isolate vitamin D in a lab, take it without fat, and expect it to work. You either get that biological synergy from a perfectly calibrated raw plant protocol, or you get it from eating a raw, pasture-raised beef liver.
It is a profound rejection of reductionist nutrition. That sort of arrogant idea that we can extract a single compound in a lab and somehow outsmart millions of years of evolutionary design.
It really is.
Which brings us to the 10th and final point of consensus. Point 10. Integrating daily movement. Clean dietary patterns must be coupled with physical action. Strength training, speed walking, cardiovascular exercise. The goal is to reduce systemic stress, support heart health, and preserve lean muscle mass.
And this point serves as the vital anchor to everything we've discussed so far. You cannot simply eat your way to optimum health.
I love this point because it shatters the illusion that diet is a silver bullet.
It really isn't. The human body is a mechanical engine. It requires physical stress and physical stimulus to properly process the fuel you're putting into it.
You could eat the most perfectly balanced, enzyme-rich, raw vegan salad, or you could eat the absolute most pristine, grass-finished, zero-toxin ribeye steak. But if you just sit on a couch in a climate-controlled room for 14 hours a day staring at a glowing rectangle, your biology will still fail.
Absolutely.
Why is movement a non-negotiable for detoxification specifically?
Well, for Null, the focus is heavily on the lymphatic system.
Okay.
The lymphatic system is a network of tissues and vessels that helps rid the body of toxins, cellular waste, and other unwanted materials. But unlike the cardiovascular system, which has the heart to pump blood, the lymphatic system does not have a central pump.
Wait, it doesn't have a pump, so how does the waste move?
You are the pump.
Oh.
The lymphatic system relies entirely on the mechanical contraction of your skeletal muscles to physically push the lymphatic fluid through the vessels.
So if you don't move,
If you don't engage in brisk walking, rebounding exercise, the fluid just stagnates.
The cellular trash bags just sit on the curb and rock.
Yes, if you don't move, you physically cannot detoxify.
And what about Bartol? Coming from a background as a Swedish strength coach, I imagine his focus is heavily geared toward muscle preservation.
Very much so. Bartol emphasizes heavy resistance training to build and maintain lean muscle mass. We often think of muscle just as tissue that moves our skeleton, but it is actually a highly metabolically active endocrine organ.
An endocrine organ. Like
Yeah.
it releases hormones.
Yes. Skeletal muscle serves as a massive sink for circulating glucose, preventing insulin resistance. Furthermore, the physical stress of lifting heavy weights signals the endocrine system to produce hormones like testosterone and human growth hormone.
Which keep you young.
Exactly. They preserve youth, bone density, and vitality.
So without that physical mechanical stress, the body essentially misinterprets your sedentary lifestyle as a state of slow decay, regardless of how perfect the food is.
Exactly. The body optimizes for the demands placed upon it. If you demand nothing, it begins to atrophy.
So we have walked through the entire 10-point checklist. It's time for the grand synthesis.
Let's do it.
When you look at this entire comparative analysis, from the rejection of sugars, seed oils, and refined grains, to the avoidance of industrial chemicals, tap water, pesticides, and plastic, all the way to the necessity of bioavailable whole foods and mechanical movement. What is the ultimate takeaway here?
I think the overarching dietary consensus is remarkably clear and incredibly powerful, regardless of your specific dietary paradigm.
Whether you fundamentally believe human beings are meant to be plant-eating herbivores running on glucose or fat-adapted carnivores running on ketones.
Exactly. The absolute unified mission is the complete and total rejection of modern industrial processing. It is a rejection of chemical contamination. The shared goal is to restore human vitality by returning to the unadulterated state of nature, whichever version of nature you happen to subscribe to.
It completely reframes the whole diet war debate. I mean, we spend so much time on the internet aggressively fighting over whether a lentil or a piece of bacon is going to kill us.
It's exhausting.
And meanwhile, the leading vegan and the leading carnivore are standing side by side, pointing at the grocery store shelves, saying, "You're arguing over nothing because 95% of this stuff isn't actually food anymore."
That is the crucial insight here. This 10-point checklist serves as a universal baseline filter. Before you even decide to go vegan, keto, paleo, Mediterranean, you have to apply these 10 rules.
Right.
If the food you are holding contains refined sugar, industrial seed oils, or artificial additives.
Or if it was sprayed with glyphosate, washed in bleach, wrapped tightly in endocrine-disrupting plastic.
It does not matter what dietary tribe you lean toward. It is going to structurally and chemically damage your physiology.
So, as you go forward, this isn't about choosing a side between plants and meat today. This checklist can serve as a highly effective, rigorous filter for your own grocery shopping and your lifestyle choices right now. It forces a return to active mindfulness.
You really can no longer just blindly consume calories. You have to assess the entire life cycle of the food, from the chemical state of the soil it grew in, to the processing plant it traveled through, to the plastic packaging it arrived in.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We started this deep dive talking about extreme opposites.
We did.
And we found clarity not in what these two opposing experts eat, but in what they completely refuse to eat. So ask yourself this. If a raw food vegan who thinks meat is highly toxic and a strict carnivore who thinks plant fiber is a biological lie.
Two groups who fundamentally disagree on what a human being is even supposed to be.
Exactly. If they can look at the modern industrialized food system and agree entirely on these 10 points of systemic failure, what does that say about the standard, highly processed items sitting in your pantry right now?
It suggests that the most radical, effective thing you can do for your health isn't choosing between plants or meat. It's choosing to stop eating the factory.